We are live. So, welcome everyone to Writers in Our Midst number 19. This is a very special Writers in Our Midst, I think, because it is a very spooky seasonal Writers in Our Midst. So, I just want to say on behalf of the Port Moody Public Library, thank you to all of the readers for today, as well as everyone who is joining us watching on Facebook. If you do have any questions for any of the authors during the event, please feel free to put them in the comments on this video, and we will make sure that they get relayed over to the authors before the event is over tonight. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Eric.
Thank you, Zadie. And thank you to the Port Moody Library for hosting us. You've been a lifesaver during COVID. I know we're all hoping for live events, but in the meantime, doing these virtual events has been a lot of fun. As you can tell by my decor, I went all out for Halloween, and we have some spooky stories for you today. I did promise Sadie and the Port Moody Library that we were going to keep it family friendly, but spoiler alert, it still is spooky. This isn't Charlie Brown's Christmas. These are horror writers. Three of the writers, when I was planning this, I had them in my head in advance 6 months ago, thinking, oh, I hope I can get these three. And then I had one surprise. My friend Trevor surprised me. He was like, oh, I do spooky too. And I was like, really? I've read your book, The Day the Pirates Went Mad. And just historical children's novel. I like to say it's a children's novels for smart children because they're going to learn a lot and they'll enjoy themselves on the journey. But Trevor was like, no, I got this great little, let's call it flash fiction, good, fast story to get us in the mood. I actually trust Trevor so much that I didn't actually read the story first. So as you can see, Trevor, I think, took this very seriously. So Trevor, if you want to kick us off, let's hear your story.
All right. Well, hello. Happy Halloween, everyone. Like Eric said, this is a special little flash fiction I just made for this particular get-together today, and I hope you enjoy it. It's a spooky what-if type story. So let me get into it. It's called Horror, a Halloween Tale. Awakened by violent shaking, I try to make sense of what's happening. My awareness is blurry, fuzzy. I have vague feelings of movement nearby, next to me. There is vibration, sound, but I can't make out any meaning. I sense touching along one of my limbs, a sudden piercing of my skin. The pain comes again, again, and again. At last, I'm left alone, bare, trembling, mutilated. I next awake to a steady staccato drumming. Moisture drips along my healing body. It's refreshing, and I soak up the feeling. I'm aware of others around me. Some are close, but all are alike, unable to move about or call out. I strain to reach them, to touch someone, anything. Sometimes I think I have, but nothing feels solid. I'm just brushing past. It's been days, weeks, months maybe. I've only felt the warmth of the sun to track the days. With no way to record them, I can only guess at the number, at the passage of time. Past pain is a faded memory. I'm only thinking of the new life I'll soon bring forth. It's growing quickly now. I've been visited more frequently of late. Around me now are many vibrations, the most yet. They're handling me roughly, prodding, pulling. They're tearing them from me. They're taking them. I'm empty and cold, inside and out. The cold makes me remember. This has happened before. Once I've rested, recovered, and forgotten, they will come again for me and the seeds of my children.
Well, that kicked things off, right? Thanks, Trevor.
I'll just end it with a slight sort of hint at what the topic was. This was perhaps a gardener's nightmare.
I got that. The title helped.
Yes.
Our next crew tonight is the writers in our midst from previous events. You know that typically I have about six guests, maybe seven even. And I ask every writer to write or talk for maybe about 5 minutes or so. And they get sort of a peek, often at chapter one of our novels. And we sort of end it with, and if you want to read the rest and find out how it ends, you got to buy the book. But we're not doing that today. I have three short story authors. They do dabble in other things, but they are, let's call them masters of the short stories. I've been reading all three of them for several years now. And I didn't want to tell them or even tease you guys with sort of a, like, oh, this is the beginning of their story. I wanted them to read their full story. So that's what we're doing today. You're going to get to read or hear all three or all four of their full stories. So they're a little bit longer, but I've read or heard them all before, and I know each of you will all enjoy it. So we're going to start things off with perhaps the person that inspired today, because Margot submitted to Writers in Our Midst probably about 2 years ago. And I've been doing themes, and I was like, okay, she's great, but not for romance night. So she sent me three really ghoulish stories, and actually she submitted a new one for today. So she's an author who lives in Coquitlam. We have a mutual friend in Bev Giori. For a while I saw your name and I was like, where do I know it from? I was like, oh, you gave the quotes for Bev's book. So I think we've had similar circles for a little while. She has been published in the Canadian Magazine, Vancouver Sun, and the Royal City Literary Arts. And I have the pleasure today to introduce to you Margot Prentice.
Oh, hello, and thank you for asking me to do this. This is a part of a trilogy, so it's not the entire story. It's called The Race. Black curly hair falls down his forehead as Jack swings his tall, sinewy frame and jumps out of bed. Today is the day of the big race, and he is not stiff or sore. His body feels relaxed and warm. Working hard, he has practiced with his coach a couple of hours each day for weeks. He is sad his father is no longer living with them, and he's not there to see him run. He can't understand why his dad changed after he got laid off work. He was angry and sometimes violent. He remembers the night he left and can still hear his parents arguing. He remembers jumping when he realized his mother is being hit. He tries to stop his dad, but he can't. Agitated and screaming, the police take his dad away. His mother has recovered from her broken jaw and bruises. Jack dresses and joins his mother and sister to eat a breakfast of porridge and toast. Hey, today's your big race, Abby smiles at him. I know you're going to win. You're going to win. Abby runs to him and jumps up to him and gives him a big hug. She is a bright-eyed, cheerful 8-year-old who adores her big brother. It's okay, Abby, replies his mother. Finish your breakfast. We'll see your big brother later. Now go get dressed and make your bed. Yes, today's the day. And he looks at them both. He finishes his breakfast, gets up, and his mother gives a warm hug. Good luck. I know you're going to win. She kisses him on the cheek. He walks down the path to the gate. He waves to his mother and sister. See you later at the track. Wish me luck. They both wave goodbye. Jack walks to the high school stadium, loosening his body in preparation for an important race. If he wins this race, Jack will be eligible for the national finals. Walking down the quiet streets of his neighborhood, he can see his high school in the distance. Jack stops, does a few stretches, and starts a slow jog towards the school stadium. The wooden bleachers are gray, but he cannot see the track, but he can hear the voices of his competitors yelling as they practice their starts. Opening the chain link gate, he slams it shut and walks through the narrow opening between the wooden seats. Coach sees him and waves. He waves back with a smile. Jack marvels at the big oval, which is a quarter of a mile of distance. The running lanes are marked with clear white lines against the black asphalt ground sand. Around the track is a large green grass field where he can see a soccer field post in the far distance. The weather is cool and there's a slight breeze that caresses his face. The sky is cloudy and is much grayer than earlier in the morning. Coach smiles at him, pats him on the back. Go do some stretches. I know you'll be good. You'll do a good time today. I know. I just know you're going to make your best time today. As he is warming up on the grass, people start to fill the stadium. He walks to his blocks, gets into position, ready, set, go. He springs into the running position and runs himself off the running blocks onto the track into a full run. Now, not noticing the darkening clouds, he feels his rhythm in full swing. He is unaware that he is the lead runner. The clouds break and starts to pour in the deluge. He keeps running and feels the chill of the wet, cold rain on his skin. Traction on the track is still good. He hears the cheers of the small crowd as he crosses the finish line. His coach runs over to him with a towel to wrap around his shoulders and pats him on the back. Hey, buddy, in spite of the rain, your time is excellent. Good enough for the Nationals. Congratulations. He looks at the bleachers, but he cannot see his mother or Abby and is puzzled why they're not there. As he prepares to go home, he phones, but there's no answer. Curious to find out why his mother hadn't come to see him, he decides to run home. His mother would be excited at the results. He arrives at the house and the front door is wide open. There's a police car in his driveway. Mom, Abby! Jack runs screaming into the house. He noticed that some of the furniture is overturned. He is frightened that something might have happened to his mother and Abby. 2 armed policemen are standing in the living room. I'm Officer Jim Jones and this is Officer Brady. Where's my mother and his sister? We had a report that your father had escaped from the hospital, and we came to the house to check on your mother and sister. He got here before we did and learned that your father had forced them into the car at gunpoint. Police report said a car was driving erratically and a police vehicle went after them in pursuit. It was your mother's car and your father was driving. They managed to stop and surround the car. Your father came out with a gun and began shooting. I'm sorry to tell you, your father is dead. Your mother and sister are being checked in the hospital. An hour had passed and Officer Jim asked if he wanted to order pizza, but Jack said no, he could not eat. The phone rang. Yes, answered Officer. Okay, I'll tell him. Hey, your mother and sister are all right. I'll be home soon. When his mother and Abby came through the door, Jack ran to them and hugged them tightly. I'm so glad you're safe. Are you okay? He knelt down and took his sister's hands. She looked him straight in the eyes and nodded, yes, I'm okay. Jack's mother takes him aside and silently says, he was going to kill us both and then shoot himself in the head. Then he forced us into the house, into my car. I only remember holding on to him, Abby, a siren, and your father jumping out of the car. Next, there was a blast of gunfire and silence. All I could hear was the sound of the gunshots. I'm okay now, but I'm still so sorry. A month later, mother decided that they should move. A fresh start, a new neighborhood would be good for all of them with the memories of the old house behind them. The new house was only a short block from a church. The church was a beautiful old building with light filtering through stained glass. They liked the congregation and the pastor, the Reverend Joe, who befriended them. He warmly welcomed them to the church and the new neighborhood. Jack even had a part-time working with Rudy, the church caretaker. They all settled in quite nicely and life seemed to be becoming normal. Jack decided to take a day off from school. He had breakfast, put on his running gear, and decided to go for a run along the riverbank. It was a cloudless, warm day, and as he ran, and he could hear the flow of the river, birds singing in the trees, and he felt at peace. He stopped to take a drink from his water bottle and sat down on a rock beside the trail. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw a sharp silver glint of sun bounce off something just a ways from where he was sitting. He got up to take a look and noticed a mirror resting on the bank. It was completely intact, not a scratch on it, in a beautifully carved wooden frame. He walked down the bank and nudged it. He picked it up, wiped it off, and decided to take it home. Maybe Abby would like it in her room. When he got home, and Abby was drawing at the kitchen table, she looked at it and saying, "What you got there?" "I found this by the river. It looked nice in your room. I'll hang it up later." After supper, Jack found the mirror in Abby's room. "Sure looks nice," she says. "I like it." At 2 in the morning, a blood-curdling scream came from Abby's room and startled Jack and his mother, who ran to the room to see what was wrong. Abby was sitting up, screaming at the top of her voice, "A monster is in my room, and he's breathing on me. Tell him to go away." "It's all right, baby. There's no one in your room." And her mother swoops her in her arms. She says, "You sleep with me tonight, and everything will be all right." Jack frowns, sniffs, and furrows his brows. "Do you smell that awful smell? I'm going to open the window and get some air into this room." The next morning is Saturday, and after breakfast, Abby leaves the table and walks to the hall to her room. She is calm and not afraid, as if she had forgotten about the monster that was terrified her the night before. Jack walks the track for a practice run and thoughts about Abby's nights. He reaches into his pocket and feels a card. He looks at it, realizing it was a card from the police officer. Maybe all that's happened to Dad has affected Abby. I wonder. On his way home, he passes a pet shop and looks in the windows at kittens in a small fenced area inside the store. He walks in, looks at the kittens and smiles, and glances at an adorable small gray one. "All I have is $20. Can I buy that one?" pointing at the gray kitten. "I would like to have him for my sister." The young clerk smiles. "Sure, you can have him for $20. I will throw in some cat food and a litter." He takes the kitten and puts him in a box and puts the food and litter in a bag. Arriving home, Jack walks to the door and yells, "Abby, I have a surprise for you." Abby walks slowly and runs to the box on the floor. She opens with a big grin and holds the kitten to her face. "I love him. I love him." That Monday, Jack arrives home. He asks about Abby. His mother says she's still in her room. He walks down the hall, opens the door to see her at her table drawing. "Hey, keeping busy with art, I see. Let me have a look." Abby looks up, and as Jack walks towards the table, she puts her hand on her drawing to cover it up. Jack runs away. At first, he cannot figure out what's on the paper. At closer look, the drawings are thick black lines, black crosses, and red circles with rat dots. Nothing like Abby would have ever drawn before. "Can you tell me what you're drawing?" He pulls the chair and sits beside her. Abby keeps drawing up and down, faster and faster. Then she stops, looks up at him and says, "Hi." Abby turns, keeps the drawing, and says, "Oh, it's just the bad money eating her baby." "Abby, that's terrible. Why are you drawing something like that?" "I don't know. The lady in the mirror eats her baby," she replies as she continues to press heavily on the paper she is drawing on. "Abby, that's awful." He puts his hand on hers and stops from drawing. "What do you mean, the lady in the mirror?" "I see her and she talks to me." She folds her hands, puts them on the table, and starts to laugh like she's never laughed before. Mother walks into the room to take Abby's laundry. She sniffs. Even with the window open during the day, that horrible smell is still out. Even the kitten won't come in the room. "Come on, both of you. Let's get ready for school." Later that day, when Jack comes home, he can hear Abby singing in her room. She is drawing again. This time he looks and she is drawing grotesque faces. He stops and looks up at Jack with she stops and looks at Jack with this crazed look in her eyes. She stops singing and gets off her chair. "Hi," she says. "Hello. Did you feed the cat today?" "No." "Where is he?" she asks. Abby points to her closet. Jack walks to the door and opens it. He cannot believe what he sees. A beautiful little kitten is hanging from the closed bar with Abby's skipping rope tied tightly around his neck. Jack takes the kitten down. She is dead and beginning to get stiff. Abby, what happened?" Abby starts singing and prancing. I did it. The lady in the mirror told me how to." Jack unties the cat and wraps it in one of Abby's sweaters. He takes Abby's hand and runs to the kitchen, sits her down, and returns to put a knife in the door. He is shaking as he dials Pastor Joe's. "Pastor Joe, you got to come over. Something terrible's going on. Can you come over right away? 20 minutes? Okay." Jack runs back to the door to her room. pounding at the door, yelling, "I want to be with my daddy. He's in the mirror too." Jack pulls her away and sits her down in the kitchen chair, holding her down. He hears the lock on the front door and his mother's coming home. "Come in, you take care of Abby. Something's very wrong in Abby's room. I know it's got to be that mirror." Breathlessly, he yells, "She killed a kitten. She said something about the lady in the mirror, telling her to do it. That thing is evil." Abby's screams become louder and louder. There's another knock on the door, and here's Pastor Joe. Come in, Pastor," Abby's mother yells. He approaches Abby, puts his hand on her head with a blessing. She yells, that hurts. And she falls into her mother's arms, crying, "Dear Lord Jesus, what's that smell?" he asks. It's in Abby's room. There's a mirror. Abby tells her to do things. Abby says it tells her to do things, terrible things. "The smell is coming from her room," Jack answers. "Okay, Jack, let's go to Abby's room, see what's going on." He pulls the knife out of the door. What a stink. He walks to the mirror. He puts his hand on his chest and stumbles slightly. "My God, I feel a terrible pain just looking at it. Let's take it down, right? Get it out of here. Get a sheet off the bed and wrap it up and take it." Jack wraps the mirror in a sheet and runs outside to the Redmond's car and puts the mirror in the trunk. When they arrive at the church, Jack notices smoke coming from the trunk. When they open it, the trunk, the sheet is on fire. Pastor Joe pulls the sheet off the mirror and stamps it out. "You grab one end, I'll take the other, and we'll take to the basement and to the big furnace." As they're running down the aisle of the church, Pastor Joe yells, Rudy, come to the furnace room now." They put the mirror down. He tells Rudy, "Let's make this fire as hot as they can. And it is burning. We will throw this abomination into the fire." The fire starts with a poof and explodes into a flame. They pick up the mirror and throw it into the fire. A horrifying noise and a chorus of wails comes from inside when the furnace becomes a roaring ball of hissing. The sounds move through the furnace room like a tornado, swing through the quiet beauty of the church in a torment of screams, cries, screams. They wait until all the sounds have stopped. "Stop." Pastor Joe raises his hand. "We will wait. And as soon as the ashes have cooled, we will bury them in consecrated holy ground in the back of the church. Rudy, get a box, put it in." They wait. The ashes cool. Rudy and Jack and Pastor Joe bury the box in the deepest corner of the churchyard. Months later, Jack is at school doing well with his track and field sports. Abby is her happy self again, and they're all adjusting. In the corner of the graveyard, shaded by the church building, away from all the other graves where the ashes of the mirror have been buried, a strange gnarled black tree is growing slowly in the shadows. And that's the end. That's it.
I'm so shocked I couldn't speak.
Okay. Did you hear that all right?
Yeah, well, we heard it fine.
Okay. Good.
I'm glad we survived the censors, but I wasn't sure. And believe it or not, that was the safest of the 3 stories that you submitted to me.
Pardon me? That was, that's part of the story about the mirrors. It's a series. That's the
series,
one, the last one. Yeah. So,
and it's the safest of the 3 too.
Yeah.
When she was submitting, it was like, well, only really an evil dad and a cat die. So.
And this one, only the cat dies. Yeah. Pretty gross.
Well, we're going to keep things going. Full disclosure, my friend, Lozano Gilbert, I published and edited his work. So he's a seat pretty much. But we've just completed his second collection of short stories. The goal is, and so far, we've been able to accomplish putting out a collection of short stories for Halloween. So he's, as I said, a good friend. He lives in Port Moody, just up the hill from me. I should tell you, and this sort of gives you an idea of what we're heading into. Lozano worked as a psychotherapist for nearly 12 years before becoming a writer, and he spent many Friday evenings on one of Mexico's main psychiatric hospital interviewing patients. Wow. Some say that his stories are based on what he's learned through those interviews, and I can tell you that those some are right. He's a very spooky writer, and keep your stay safe out there. Carlos, Lozano, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Well, I'm going to read tonight's story in this book. He said it's called Nevermore. I'm telling you, I heard that crow talk, Laura said as she pointed dark light with her little arm towards the cedar beside the house. She looked like an 8-year-old, even though she was 11. When she looked back, there was nothing on the branch anymore, but she was sure she had seen it, and what was worse, heard him, to be more precise. Something in the crow's voice sounded masculine. She couldn't quite tell what it was, but she was quite sure. She turned back, expecting to receive a tell me another tall tale look. Instead, she found Uncle Willard filling his pipe. He didn't say anything. Did you hear what I just said? She blurted. That crow. I heard you the first time, Uncle Willard said. And before you ask, no, I don't think you're crazy, and I don't reckon you're hearing voices that ain't there. Then, you just heard a trained crow. People around this part split their tongues teaching to talk parrot-like. Never seen it before, have you? Laura shook her head while Uncle Willard lighted his pipe. After a few puffs, he said, I don't really know how they do it. Crows are vengeful critters. If you think we use scarecrows so that we don't have to be all day long in the field, you'll be only partly right. Partially, Laura said. What's that? Partially right. Whatever. I'm trying to teach you something here. We use the scarecrows to avoid the crow's revenge. If you piss off a crow bad enough, he'll remember your face and come back after you with a bunch of its friends. They call it a murder of crows for a reason. Now, imagine what it would do to you if you split its tongue. Uncle Willard gave a wet chuckle that sounded halfway between a gasp for breath and a cough. I won't, Uncle, Laura said. Sure you won't, but stay away from crows anyway, especially if they're talking to you. Why? Well, people said they may do something stupid, like once I heard that one of them convinced a kid to jump out of the window. But I know I shouldn't jump out of windows, she said. Laura's Uncle Willard nodded and mounted his pipe. She heard him exhale, and a puff of smoke blew off his pipe. Then he said, but imagine if I was the boys you heard. What if I told you the house was on fire? Would you jump then? Uncle Willard met Laura's gaze. She could almost see the flames in Uncle Willard's eyes, as if they were a gateway to hell. She imagined the house on fire, herself opening the windows, preparing to jump. Would you trust him enough to jump? Just stay away from anything that talks that's not a God-fearing man or woman, I say. Crows have many tricks, Laura, many. She didn't see or hear the crow for the rest of that day. That night, she dreamt of a black crow in the tree outside her bedroom. The bird croaked, and she could see the noise as concentric circles coming towards her in her bed. As the circles enveloped her, she saw herself being held by the wrist by someone, a man, but she couldn't see his face. This man opened an old man's door, one with wooden paneling on the outside, and forced her in. Then he locked the door and closed it. She pulled the handle to open the door, but she couldn't. Then the man got into the driver's seat and turned towards her. Your parents are dead, the man said, and began driving. She clawed at him to let her go. In the rearview mirror, she could see her parents holding hands and becoming smaller as the van sped away. They became smaller and smaller until they disappeared. Then she looked at her hands and saw they were covered in black feathers. The next morning, very early, after they had milked the cows, Laura sat outside the barn against the hay when she heard. She striggled her head, expecting to find the crow, but instead it was Candy, the fiery-haired girl from the neighboring farm. The first time Laura met her, she had said, My name is Candice, but everyone calls me Candy. Laura had giggled, and her laughter made Candy laugh as well. Being the same age made them instant friends, as they weren't any other girls in the vicinity. They talked for a while, finding shapes in the clouds and letting the length of the wheatgrass decide how their future husbands would be. Eventually, Laura told Candy about the crow. But what Uncle Willard doesn't, well, what he says doesn't make much sense, Laura said. If they really cut their tongues, the crows would hate them. They wouldn't want to learn anything from them. Candy didn't answer straight away. To Laura, she looked different. As when you do when you want to say something you're not supposed to. Just say it, Laura said. Say what? Laura rolled her eyes. But my grandma told me I shouldn't tell anyone, Candy said. But your grandma is alone. She will never know you told me, Candy. Come on. After a little consideration, Candy said, my grandma said there used to be witches here, and that they used to kidnap little boys and girls to be their spies. They hint at faint rustle, maybe of fallen leaves or batting wings. Laura saw Candy swivel her head from one side to the other. Laura copied her to check if someone was overhearing them, but found no one. Then Candy leaned closer to Laura and whispered, but my grandma said that she would turn them into crows so that they could spy for her without no one knowing. Laura remembered the dream and felt her eyes grow in their sockets, threatening to escape her face. And that the witches then continued to split the kid's tongue with their razor-sharp nails to turn them into crows. Lara gasped and grasped her mouth with both of her hands as if to avoid an imaginary witch from reaching into it. But then her expression changed to one of disbelief. But after such a horrible thing, why would they spy for her? Laura didn't know whom to believe. Uncle Willard's story seemed unlikely, and the fact that he just ordered her to avoid the crows without believable reasons was suspicious. Her parents would always explain things to her until she could understand them. Uncle Willard wasn't like that. On the other hand, she hadn't known Candy that long. Maybe she was just trying to scare her and have a laugh at her expense. Grandma said that the witch would promise to turn them back into humans after 5 years if they were good enough spies. Candy leaned even closer, her lips touching Laura's ear from an instant, and whispered, but to be turned back into humans, they would need to find another child for the witch. Laura felt unable to draw breath for a moment, and then inhaled as loudly as a drowning man breaching the water's surface. Something in Candy's story froze her inside. She felt so alone and defenseless. If that happened to her, would anybody care? Would anybody ever notice? Laura turned towards Candy, who nodded as they stared, their noses almost touching. Then Laura said, maybe that's the real reason why Uncle Willard doesn't want me talking to her. Candy eased back. Grandma said about 20 years ago, a couple of boys went missing. They searched the whole valley, but they couldn't find them. One night, 5 or 6 families from the farm, the missing boys among them, organized a lynching party and went to what used to be the Russell farm. They razed the building to the ground, burned it all with everyone still in there. The only thing left now is the stone chimney and Gandhi Bo! Uncle Willard barked between clenched teeth. If I ever catch you gossiping with my little Laura again, I'm gonna tell your daddy to spank you so bad you'll remember not to go propagating rumors ever again. Andy darted into the wheat field, and from a distance, it looked as if she was swimming in a golden sea. Finally, she went over an amber wave and disappeared. Pay no mind to her, too. Pay no mind to her, Laura. She's just trying to scare you. She was doing a good job at it, Laura said. Come on, honey, Uncle Willard said, and stared at her after checking a count for injuries. I believe there are still a few cookies you haven't eaten in that old cookie jar. Now's the time to finish him. Uncle Willard extended his hand towards her. She didn't hold his hand often, raspy and callous as it was, but today it felt as a lifeline. Something in what Candy had said disturbed her deeply, although she couldn't tell exactly what it was. She took his hand and they walked holding hands towards the house. Her parents had also died in a fire, just like the family lynched in the farm, and she hadn't been allowed to see the bodies or say goodbye, but she was pretty sure that wasn't what had bothered her. Two questions from her dream lingered in her mind for a moment. Have I already been kidnapped? Is he really my uncle? The cookies took all thoughts of witches and crows away from her for the rest of the day. It was only after Uncle Willard had talked her into sleep that she began thinking of what Candy had told her. What if the stories were true? What if that crow was really a transformed human being, a kid just like her, trapped in an odd body? Uncle Willard only let her have cookies during the weekend. Why then had he let her finish them now? Was he trying to cover up for something? Truth, maybe? Maybe her dream was the truth. Her uncle had kidnapped her and told her her parents were dead, or what were they? Then she heard a tapping. She wasn't sure where it came from, the window, the floorboards, or did it come from the wall? If you can trust other people, can you trust your own senses? She slapped herself hard and felt the sting on her cheek. She felt her hand throbbing, and both hand and cheek felt hot. She had done it as a reaction without thinking. She wouldn't allow herself to even consider being crazy. She could trust herself, even if she couldn't trust Uncle Willard or Candy or no one else just yet. She heard the tapping again. Remember what the child services lady said, she told herself. You have to be brave, Laura. You're on your own now. She was afraid to look. What if it was the crow again? What if it started talking about her parents again? She turned on her Tinkerbell bedside lamp. With the room lit, she decided not to wake until Uncle Willard, not unless she saw the crow again. The tapping resumed. She had to look, but she didn't want to. Uncle Willard, she called, but she knew it was too faint for him to hear. Uncle Will, she said again, louder, but still too soft, trying not to sound afraid, but failing. It's me, a boy said. Candy. Where are you? Laura said. At the window, but don't open it. I don't want to get spanked. Laura thought the voice sounded a little off, as if someone was mocking Candy's voice, but it was so close to the actual sound that it might actually be her. Maybe it was just the window pane muffling her voice. Could she trust her senses? She raised her hand to slap herself again, but felt her cheek still throbbing and lowered. You sound off, Laura said. Prove it's really you. Who else would know about what I told you earlier today about the witch? Laura sighed. It's you then. She exhaled relief. Good. I thought it would be the crow again, talking about my parents. What did it tell you? The crow told me they are still alive, Laura said. And then I tried to show it to Uncle Willard, but it was gone. What if I told you I heard they were being held in the cellar of the old Russell farm? Who told you that? Laura said. My grand. Laura had never heard Candy call her grandma Granny, but she put the thought away. But my parents died. That's why I live with Uncle Willard, she said. Nah, they just made you believe that. My best guess is that your parents trained the crow to speak. Maybe they have a picture of you and told the crow to look for you and tell you. I'm going to set them free so that you can have them back. You'll do that for me? Laura said. Sure, come with me. I can't. I'm not supposed to go out at night, Laura said. She wanted to go, but was afraid at the same time. What if Uncle Willard had a real reason for her not to go at night, even though he never explained it to her? What if there were bears or cougars or werewolves? Come on, I'll race you to the farm, the boy said. A big rustle came from the tree's branches outside. Laura tossed in her bed for a few moments. What if it was true? What if Uncle Willard was just a grumpy old man who just wanted to have her as unpaid labor for his farm? What if he was really hiding her points? Was it still named kidnapping if they were adults? She felt truly lonely, as we all feel sometimes. A thought appeared in her mind. The crow had said it, and now Candy had confirmed it. Two unconnected sources. Then it must be true. My parents are alive. That realization made her jump out of bed and get dressed. She carried her shoes in her hand until she was out of the door. Then she put them on and ran into the woods towards the Russell farm. As Candy had told her, at the end of what all folks called Russell Road, the only thing left was a vertical pile of mortared river stones, the chimney. Candy! Laura cupped her mouth with her hand and called, Candy! Down here, a muffled voice came from the top of the chimney. We're in the cellar. There's a trapdoor. Laura missed the trapdoor the first couple of times she went around. The lack of light would have made it impossible to find it. Only the tapping coming from the other side of the door allowed her to find it. The hatch felt too heavy for her, even though it wasn't that big. Maybe it was rusty or something. She saw a piece of wood a few yards away and used it as lever. All the force in her arms wouldn't dislodge it. Think, Laura, think. She stepped on top of the wooden plank and began jumping on it. On the third try, the hatch opened with a large crack. In the hall, it smelled like recently removed soil and something musty. She reached with her little foot to try to find the steps. When she found one, she stepped on it and moved her feet toward the next step. There was nothing there. She fell into the hole and hit her knees and palms to get something hard at the bottom. Laura turned around and saw the stars shining from a blue square on top of her. Mom, Dad, where are you? Then a crow landed on the side of the trapdoor. She could see its outline against the starry sky. She reached out to grab it, but realized it was too far away. She had fallen into a pit too deep for her to climb out of. No, Laura screamed, where are my parents? She yelled at the crow. Tears began flowing down her cheeks. When am I going to see them? The crow emitted something like a laugh and said, nevermore.
Thank you, Lorano. I love the Edgar Allan Poe references. I also love the voices. Even that added a good tone to it. I don't think I could have done Uncle Wilbur as well as you. So our last reader today is KT Wagner, for writer supreme, let's say. I've read some of her stories, and online I've seen her read some of her stories. Uh, as she puts it, she's surrounded by gnomes, gargoyles, and poisonous plants, where she writes her gothic horror and op-ed pieces in the garden of her Maple Ridge home. She kind of mentions that she works in the literary community, which is a complete understatement. Those of you who know me might know that I'm on the board for the Tri-City Wordsmiths, and I could attest that it's a lot of work. KT is the Golden Ear writer. She puts the whole thing together herself. She's very active in the literary community. So I'm very happy that she's here today. I should mention, and I'll put it in the chat, that her website is the northernlightsgothic.com. And take it away, Kate.
I probably should unmute. So thank you, Eric, and thank you for inviting me to read tonight. And thank you to my fellow readers for spooky stories so far. I guess I'm closing things out with Enid and the Owls, which is a story that was first published by Aphotic Realm, and then again in Vested Tales of the Realm. From the bottom step of the shadowed porch, Enid Bailey peers into the inky depths. What kind of people fail to leave a light on at night? The moon is waning, but still bright. The steamy warmth of the day lingers. A night bird flaps past, briefly silhouetted. She recognizes the owl and smiles. One foot, then the other, she shifts her weight back and forth. Standing still too long locks up her knees, and it's worse since the accident. Blossom-laden lilac branches billow to the side of the porch. The fragrance tickles her nostrils, and she presses a finger across her upper lip to stifle a sneeze. The licorice scent confirms it. The white lilacs are Madame Lemoyne, the variety Miss Wilson requested. Up the stairs Enid trudges, lifts the iron ring and thumps it against the door. The sound echoes on the other side. Miss Wilson whispered to Enid about her wish to savor the perfume of Madame Lemoyne one last time. Each night for a week now, right before her midnight cleaning shift at the seniors' home. Elysium, in the neighborhood for this exact variety. She frowns. The blossoms are fading. She cannot wait another day to ask permission. Surely the homeowners will understand. Miss Wilson, the poor soul, won't make it through another year. And this is Enid's last chance to fulfill her wish. She slips a pair of garden shears from her pocket. Bouquet cut, Enid unties her thin cotton apron, borrowed from the manor kitchen, and lays it on the ground. The faded stain on the front of her uniform is now exposed. She hesitates, swallows, and reminds herself that no one will notice in the dark. Her fingers brush the embroidered logo on the right breast pocket of her shirt. Tri-City Janitorial Services. 26 years and an impeccable employee record at the Central City residence. She took pride in the work when others considered it a stopgap or a stepping stone to something better. Not Enid, she loved her job. Maybe she could have explained that better. After she slowed down a little, they just tossed her aside. Oh, stop thinking about it. She returns her attention to the task at hand. Wrapping the lilac bouquet in the apron, she carefully straightens. Her bones pop and creak. Despite arthritic joints, she did not log a single sick day in over 20 years. But did that count for anything? Of course not. They were so kind on the surface, but beneath the soft words were hard hearts. They offered her two choices. The night shift at Elysium Manor, or she could move in with her daughter, all the way across the country in a town she'd never visited. Of course, she picked the manor. She could still be of service, contribute, make a difference. They refused to issue her a new uniform. Her to remember the night birds calling, and she didn't answer. A lump lodges in her throat. Maybe she let people down in other ways. Maybe that's why they deemed her useless. She's trying to make up for it, to make a difference where she is. Sulfur yellow streetlights cast long shadows. She hobbles along the sidewalk, her cane tapping against crumbling cement. She's only a bit wobbly and manages without the stick at work. They might misunderstand her need for it and send her away. Besides, holding the vacuum keeps her steady enough. Across the road, a man walks his dog in the opposite direction. Enid smiles and nods and continues on her way. She glances back. The man stares after her. Rounding the corner, Enid glares at the crooked sign for Elysium Manor. Such a pretentious name. The nursing home is a one-story building with a flat roof, tiny windows, and dented aluminum siding. A 20-foot laurel hedge shields the neighbors from the eyesore. Slipping through the staff entrance, Enid pauses in the dark kitchen. She arranges the flowers in an industrial-sized metal measuring cup and leaves them on the counter. Her job here is not particularly hard, vacuuming and light dusting mostly. At first, she was concerned about the noise of the vacuum, but most of the residents are either deep sleepers or turn off their hearing aids at night. Only a handful are awake during her shift. Her night owls, she smiles. They assure her the noise from the vacuum isn't a problem. Only Abigail, the night nurse, seems bothered, but she's always grumpy. Enid finds it best to avoid her. The work soothes. She's only responsible for the corridors and common areas, which are deserted and dark in the wee hours. Sometimes, despite the ache in her bones, she imagines herself young again. It helps pass the time. On her break, she delivers the lilacs to Miss Wilson. The former gardener resembles a snowy owl, the pale, desiccated skin of her face framed by a puff of white hair. Enid places the lilac bouquet on a metal trolley and pushes it up to the bed rail. Miss Wilson struggles onto her elbows and leans toward the blossoms. Enid longs to help her, but it's strictly against the rules for cleaning staff to touch patients. She's proud of being a model employee. She squints around the room. Boxes are piled in the corner behind the late Mrs. Rosenberg's bed. The pile obscures half the window. Enid's chest tightens and she clenches her fists. It's inhumane the way some residents are treated. This may be one of the city's charity homes, but that does not excuse the callousness on display. She misses Mrs. Rosenberg, her burrowing owl. The poor woman pined for books. She loved to read, but was almost blind. On breaks, Enid read to Mrs. Rosenberg from novels she found in the tiny resident library. Then it happened in the middle of a chapter from Jane Eyre. The old woman breathed a contented sigh. A radiance illuminated her face, and she was gone. Enid smiles at the memory. Miss Wilson smiles back and exhales a rattling noise. She falls back onto her pillow, cradling a blossom against her chest. Her face glows. Thank you, my dear. Thank you. It's so hard to respond. Miss Wilson's eyes flutter close. Enid's eyes are moist. You're welcome, she whispers. Miss Wilson appears almost transparent. Enid watches for a minute, then carefully backs out of the room and closes the door. She always feels displaced and confused after tending to one of her owls. Pushing the vacuum around the front hall calms the crashing waves of confusion in her head. Her uniform is wrinkled and her apron damp. She smooths the material with her free hand and steers the vacuum back into the corridor between the resident rooms. Shoulders hunched, head bowed, she shuffles along. At times like this, the injury bothers her the most. The doctors informed her she'd have to learn to live with the pain. It's a miracle you survived a fall down a flight of stairs, they said. Like she should be thankful to be alive and not complain. Mrs. Pedersen's keening cry is haunting and sad, like a great gray owl, and it tugs Enid away from her own misery. Nobody else responds. Enid straightens and grinds her teeth. Nurse Abigail's ability to ignore the crying night after night speaks to the woman's missing soul. It would be heartless to wait until after her shift to visit her gray owl. Have you found her? Mrs. Peterson asks when Enid enters her room. I'm sorry, I still need to call the number the lady on Bracken Avenue mentioned, she whispers, though she wonders why she bothers. Mrs. Pedersen's roommate sleeps like the dead. The roommate arrived 2 days ago and Enid still hasn't learned her name. There are many residents she doesn't know because they keep daylight hours. A chill finger of regret slithers down her spine. She misses the daylight and the sunshine. Please, please call tonight. Mrs. Pedersen's reedy voice echoes through the room. Enid longs to wrap her arms around the old woman and comfort her. I'll try. She met Mrs. Pedersen her first night at Elysium Manor. Some of the others wanted to chit-chat, but the frail woman got straight to the point. Find my daughter. I was never a good mother, but before I pass, I want her to know that I always loved her. The address she provided was a few blocks further than Enid normally ventured. When she finally found it late one evening, the woman who answered the door laughed. Mrs. Pedersen, pretty sure that old biddy died a decade ago. Her daughter moved to Long Point. Check the phone book. Enid hesitates to telephone in the middle of the night, and Nurse Abigail is sure to find out about an unauthorized long-distance call. Mrs. Peterson's mouth stretches wide and an undulating cry fills the room. Enid abandons her vacuum and heads down the hall to the office. Surely Nurse Abigail will understand. With trembling fingers, she punches in the number from memory. Hello? The woman on the other end of the line sounds tired and annoyed. My call display says Elysium Manor. Why are you calling me in the middle of the night? Enid repeats Mrs. Pedersen's message quickly and waits. There is a sound like a sob, then silence. The silence expands. Finally, a chilly response. You must have your Pedersens mixed up. My mother is long in the ground. A click and the line disconnects. Enid sighs, another dead end. She hurries through the silent hall to tell Mrs. Pedersen they must keep looking. Nurse Abigail waits outside the old lady's door. Enid, why don't you lie down for a bit? She doesn't sound grumpy. She sounds tired. Enid stops in confusion. Nurse Abigail holds open the door. Her gray owl isn't in her bed. What have you done with Mrs. Pedersen? Enid clutches the door frame. Nurse Abigail shakes her head. You've outdone yourself tonight. I found the lilacs after a nice young man called in with a concern about a resident wandering the streets. And why hide flowers in an empty room? Enid blinks. She stares at her vacuum. For the briefest moment, it looks like a walker. She blinks again. The lilacs were for Miss Wilson. I'll apologize to the homeowners. We don't have a miss. Nurse Abigail is always grumbling about something. A new voice fills the corridor. Enid tilts her head. It sounds like a screech owl. the end.
Thank you, Katie. Well, that's the end of our story portion of today. If anybody was watching and stayed to the end, good for you guys. It was a little rough at the beginning, and the stories were tough to get through, but I love the way we ended it, Katie. It's a nice story to end the day on. I'm not sure if Sadie had any questions for us today. We call it an early night.
So I haven't seen any questions coming through on the Facebook group, but why don't we give it a couple minutes, and anyone who is watching tonight, if you have any questions for any of our 4 readers this evening, let us know in the chat, and we will pass them along. We've had some great comments coming through about all of the stories in our Facebook chat tonight. So congratulations to all of you on your readings tonight and on your stories. They were definitely good to set the scene and set the season, I think, for this time of year. For sure. I always like getting into the kind of spooky spirit. I don't do super well with scary things, but slightly creepy and slightly spooky is great. So definitely gets you into the season. We'll just give it another couple minutes and see if there were any questions that came through. I would like to know, oh, sorry, Eric, you go ahead.
No, you go first.
I was just going to say, I would like to know for all of our authors, do you find that for kind of the spooky stuff, you like to write it at certain times of year, or does it just kind of naturally come to you throughout the year? Oh, Lozano, I think you're muted.
Yeah. Well, I'll go first while everybody's unmuting. Then I would say that I don't do this sort of writing normally. I think everybody else is more of a, well, maybe we'll hear from them in a second, but about how normal it is for them. But I avoid this type of stuff myself, just trying to think about it and all that. But sometimes, when something comes along, like an event like this, and you get hit between the eyes by an idea, might as well, right?
Just let the inspiration happen and go
Exactly.
with it.
Exactly.
Wonderful. Thanks, Trevor. Lozano or Margot?
I think for me, it starts with one story and there's more stories to add on. But, this is just about a mirror and there's 3 stories. And then other stuff, oh, well, there's more to this. So it's another story, not necessarily a continuation, but, that's where my head goes. Yeah, I entertain myself with my spooky story, and I love Stephen King, and I loved all the readers tonight. KT Wagner, I like that one. Oh, and yours, Lozano. Yeah, Erickson. Yeah, this was fun. Thank you for asking me.
Wonderful. Thanks, Margot.
Yeah.
Lozano, what about you?
Yeah, no, I write them all year long, so it's not just something that I do during the season. It's all year long. I get to share them with you guys, like during this season, but for me, it's every day. It's Halloween almost, right?
Okay, T, I asked, do you find that you tend to write these kinds of stories at specific times of year, or does your inspiration for this kind of story flow year round?
I tend to write horror and dark fantasy year round, but I do like to write about the themes of the time of year. So I tend to write like Krampus stories at Christmas, and I'm writing one about a phobia of pumpkins right now. So
yeah,
very fitting. I like it.
Oh, thank you. Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. So it doesn't.
I had a question comment about Katie's story. I was wondering, like, is the character really seeing these owls? Is it a dementia type thing? It feels to me like dementia would be more scary than if you actually saw ghosts, especially ghostly owls. I mean, that seems pretty, nice in a way to know that would happen.
I don't have an answer to that. I think I just leave it up to the reader to decide what's going on.
Mhm.
Right.
That way it can be anything.
I
Be
think
whatever they want.
some of the ghostly stories for me, for years I was practicing psychic, and that is like talking with the dead. And I've had so many scary, interesting experiences that I do write about some of them. Yeah, so some of its background, and there was a murder in my family as well. So, so there, yeah, that's some of it's experience, imagination, and I love writing about it.
Mirrors are scary things too. I think if you start seeing anybody in a mirror, that's
I have.
time to run away.
I have. Anyway,
True. Sometimes I look in a mirror and I see this old man.
Yeah, it happens to me too.
I see my mother. But that's everybody. Yeah, get out of there. Well, thank you. It's nice meeting you all. Very interesting. I sat here and listened to the stories. Way better than television. Come on. Way
Yeah.
better than TV. Yeah.
I think with Lozano's story too is there's another thing in there is like somebody's tapping at your window or something is tapping at your window. That's just roll over, put the pillow on your head, something. Don't go look.
Don't do it. Yeah.
But don't get dressed up and go outside.
No,
Yeah.
definitely don't do it.
Yeah, don't do it. Anyway.
If I could add, we've done this together a few times, Sadie, and for some reason today I got the inspiration of I should put people's social media in the chat. So I finally did that. But, Margot, I didn't have any for you. So is there anywhere that people can find you online? I found some of your short stories online when I searched, but
No, hey, I'm 84. The computer world is like the devil to me. I think the devil.
Halloween.
No, but this is something I did. This is amazing. No, I don't. Have stories published, but no, I used to be. I did stand-up comedy for years as well, so that's on
I found that on
Facebook.
YouTube. Yeah.
Did you see that? Yeah, so that was
Oh,
fun.
yeah.
I love writing jokes, so I love that. But I've not been well enough to go up on stage. But yeah, I do all kinds of writing. So there you go. Anyway,
Wonderful. Well, it doesn't look like we've had any questions come through, but we've had lots of great comments. So people are saying thank you so much for the readings. KT, what a superb story. Everyone had kind of gotten those comments about how wonderful the readings and how great the stories were as well. So if you have a chance to our readers to go on and check out the comments on the video, there's some really wonderful ones there.
Okay.
Eric, I'm not sure if you had any closing comments for this evening.
Only if you let me plug some other readings coming up.
Please do.
The next one that you and I are doing together is December 1st. I'm not 100% sure what the theme's going to be, but it's going to border on family drama. I don't know if we'll have a Christmas theme. I know it's timely, but it might just be more of family drama or even literature. We haven't touched that subject yet. I also am doing a panel without you. I can't tax out the Fort Moody Library all the time. November 18th on the Writers in Our Mist Facebook page with some of my female peers, and we're going to talk about strong female characters. I did this for Crime Writers of Canada, and it was really fun. I thought I'd broach the subject again with some of the local writers. So that's November 18th.
okay, good.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you so much to all of our readers for this evening. It was so wonderful to hear your stories tonight. And I will be looking for more from all of you because those were all excellent. So thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who is tuning in on Facebook tonight as well. We will see you again soon. Have a good night, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for having us.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you for
Thank you,
having
Sadie.
us.
Bye.
Bye. Nice meeting you.
Bye.